Good day, learners. Our topic is about giving expanded definitions of words. This lesson is designed for you to develop your knowledge and skills in giving expanded definitions. Certainly, you'll be reporting your research, right? Or you'll be presenting it to the panel. And with that, you need to discuss more than just the dictionary meaning of words. For a concept to be understood better, you need to explain more about an idea by giving expanded definitions. And after going through this lesson, you are expected to give the importance of forming the expanded definitions of words. Second, determine the different techniques of expanded definitions, because in giving expanded definitions, we have 11 techniques. And lastly, use a variety of techniques in expanding definitions. And for the definition of, or when we say expanded definitions, it means you are going deeper than a simple dictionary definition for. So it is not limited to the layman's term or the definition that you can get from dictionary. Expanded definitions defines and explains a single term, concept, or object, pins down the meaning of a specific word, or defines an abstract concept. Because when we are to give expanded definition, it is important, or we consider the expanded definition as an important writing tool that we will be needing if we are to write for a person who is not an expert or specialist in a particular subject. An expanded definition explains a complex or unfamiliar term to make it easier to understand, which is important to effective communication. That is why our main objective in writing or giving expanded definition is to let the people who is not an expert to the things that we want to convey to them. Just like you, you are students and you are to write, or you are writing now your study or research. Mainly, the objective of your research paper is to let the other students to have or engage in writing research paper. And your study or your paper will serve as their guide also, or for them to have an idea on how to write their research paper, just like what you are doing nowadays. So that is the definition and the explanation in expanding or giving expanded definitions of complex terms. And now let's have the techniques in expanding definitions. First one is etymology. Explains the origin of the word itself. When we say etymology, this is where the term came from. And usually, the origin of the words came from Old English, which is the Latin. Okay, just like what we have in our example, let's use the term arbitration. So this is the definition using etymology. Arbitration comes from the Latin judicium, which means judgment. Okay, so that's how the definition of arbitration is given in this example, by using the etymology or the origin of the term. And we may also have the other example, for example, the biology. Okay, it came from the Latin word bios and logos, which means study and life. That is why the meaning of biology is study of life. So that's how you may expand or give expand definition by using the etymology. Second one is history. Discusses the history of the term, its use, and controversies associated with it. We all know that when we say history, these are the things that happened in the past. So, in giving expanded definitions for a term, we may use the history by identifying its use during those years or year in the past, and also if there is an issue or controversy associated with that term. So we can give or explain it easier for our reader if they can relate it to what happened in the past. So we still have our example term, just like what we have in etymology, which is the arbitration. So this is the example sentence. The use of arbitration as third party mediation dates from the 1630s. So that's how um, the arbitration term is being defined using the history. Third one, we have cause and effect. Discusses how the situation came about and what effects it may have. So, in giving expanded definition, we may use the cause and effect by giving how the situation, for example, came or what are the reasons behind it and what is the effect that happened because of that. So, for our example, we still have the term arbitration. Let me read the example. An arbitration clause is considered to be ambiguous when the parties do not express clearly that in case of conflict, the method to use to settle the disagreements will be arbitration. Hence, parties are compelled to refrain from signing confusing agreements to arbitrate. Because the general rule is that arbitration is prompted out of the contract, and if there is not an explicit arbitration clause within the contract, it would not be an agreement to arbitrate. So let's determine what is the cause and what is the effect in this definition or in this expanded definition. All right, here it is. So as you can see, we have underlined words or phrase here, and we also have bold with red um, text color here. So what do you think, or which do you think is the effect, and which do you think is the cause from this expanded definition of the term arbitration? All right. The cause is the underlined phrase or text. And the effect is the one that is bold with red color. So the effect of the arbitration is parties are compelled to refrain from signing confusing agreements to arbitrate because, or the cause of it is because the general rule is that arbitration is prompted out of the contract, and if there is not an explicit arbitration clause within the contract, it would not be an agreement to arbitrate. And I think the term that you may use, or I believe that the term that you use in order for you to easily identify the cause is the word because. Yes, that is the signal word that we may use in order for us to easily identify what is the cause and what is the effect. Next is description. Description lists and defines the term. So in giving expanded definition using the description, you are just to provide list and defines the term with that list. So again, we have the term arbitration. So this is how it's used in description. Arbitration is the process of solving an argument between people by helping them to agree to an acceptable solution. It is the formal process of having an outside person chosen by both sides to a disagreement to end the disagreement. So this is how the arbitration or this is how the term arbitration is expanded using the description. It is by describing that arbitration is the process and how it is done. Next is principles of operation. Discusses how something functions, including any special materials or conditions required. So, principles of operation. From the root word or from the word operation, with its root word operate, meaning to say, you are to give or expand the definition of the term by telling how it is being operated or how does this thing function. So that is how you will give expanded definition using the principles of operation. Just like what we have in our example, arbitration is conducted by a trained arbiter who sets down the rules that the parties must abide by. The object of arbitration is to obtain a fair resolution of disputes by an impartial third party without unnecessary expense or delay. Parties should be free to agree on how their disputes are resolved, subject only to such safeguards as are necessary for the public interest. Courts should not interfere. So this is how the arbitration is being defined, or this is how the definition of arbitration is expanded using the principles of operation, showing how it is done or how does it function. And we have the classification. Shows how the topic fits into a larger category, or it shows how it is being classified in a larger category. Example, arbitration is one of the alternatives to going into a formal court to settle disputes. The signal word or the clue for us to identify that the classification technique is being used in defining arbitration here is the phrase is one of the alternatives, meaning to say it is just part of many things or techniques in going to a formal court for settling the disputes. So that's how we may use the classification in giving expanded definition of a term. Next is contrast. Shows how the topic differs from others in the same class. From the word contrast, which means showing the difference or how does this term different from the other term, but still they are in the same class. Okay? Example, in our in an arbitration proceeding, no lawyers are present. The main difference between arbitration and litigation law is that the court is involved in the case of litigation as it is a lawsuit, whereas in arbitration, a settlement between the parties is done outside of court. So, in giving expanded definition for contrast, we may be needing another term that is opposite or having um, different characteristic from the term that we are discussing. Okay, just like what we have in our example, the contrasting term for arbitration is litigation. And the difference between the two is presented here in this definition, wherein when we say arbitration, we don't need any lawyer during the court proceeding. Unlike in litigation, we may be needing lawyers since this is a lawsuit. Okay? Unlike in arbitration, that the main objective of it is just to have a settlement first between the parties. And it may be done outside the court, unlike for litigation that it should be done inside a court. So that's how we may expand the meaning or the definition of the word by using contrast. And of course, if we have the contrast, we also have the comparison. So when we say comparison, it shows how the topic is similar to others in the class. So in comparison, you will show how the term is the same or similar to others in the class. If we have shown the difference in the contrast, difference of litigation and arbitration, this time in comparison, we will show the similarity of a lawsuit or litigation and the arbitration. So, example, as with lawsuits or other court proceedings, the decision in an arbitration proceeding is legally binding on the parties. So just like in lawsuits or litigation that is being done inside the court, the arbitration proceeding is also legal. So meaning to say, the settlement between two parties are also a legal binding of them or legal settlement between the two parties. And next we have analogy. Analogy explains and compares two dissimilar topics where the second is familiar to the audience. So in analogy, we will compare or show the similarities between two dissimilar topics, wherein the second term or topic is familiar to the audience or it is widely known, unlike with the term that we are giving expanded definition. So, example, an arbiter is like a referee. He or she listens to both sides and decides as to who is at fault without the intervention of outside parties. So, the arbiter is being compared to the role of referee, wherein just like the referee, the arbiter of course, listen to both sides. We may also have the other terms such as moderator as familiar or the second familiar to the audience for the term arbiter. And we have the examples. Represent other things because they have all the main qualities or characteristics that the thing they represent also have. So in this expanded or technique in giving expanded definition from the word itself, examples, which means we will give or you are going to give other example that also have qualities or characteristic or that they both represent. So example, arbitration was used to settle the dispute between the labor union and management. So just like any arbitration proceedings, we can also use arbitration in settling the labor union or the having the settlement between the labor union and the management. Next, two people who are divorcing cannot agree on terms and allow a third party to come in to help them negotiate. So we may use the arbitration in this situation wherein the couple who are planning to divorce cannot agree on terms. That's why they allow a third party, which is the arbitration, to come in order for them to be um, negotiate easily or with the help of the arbiter. So we are also experiencing this thing in our community, right? Wherein if there's any people from your neighborhood who are having an issue with their properties, for example, they may go to the barangay hall wherein the arbiter will be the barangay captain and there will be a settlement between two parties. So we may also use that example in this term, the arbitration. And lastly, we have the illustrations. So when we say illustrations, these are the pictures in a book, magazine, etc., or the process of illustrating something. So from the word itself, illustrations, providing pictures or graphics in order to explain the term. So in the example that we have from the first technique up to now, the arbitration term, we may have an illustration of three persons who are talking and showing that there is a middleman or the third party between the two person who are having their settlement. So that is how we may use the illustration in giving expanded definition. And that's how our lesson conclude or end. So I hope you listened very well and you have understood our lesson in order for you to answer your activity sheet for this lesson. So thank you so much, and I hope you've learned from this video lesson.